we are starting to see a very clear trend across the NFL. And if you're paying close attention to what's happening around the Detroit Lions right now, this is one of those storylines that could quietly become a major talking point as the offseason unfolds. The league is leaning more and more into heavy tight end personnel groupings, and that shift could have real implications for how Detroit builds its roster in the coming months. At the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, several college tight ends made it obvious they are fully aware of what's happening at the pro level. Ohio State tight end Max Clare talked openly about how much he loves seeing 12 personnel and 13 personnel becoming more common. For context, 12 personnel means 2 tight ends and 1 running back on the field. 13 personnel bumps that up to 3 tight ends and 1 running back. These formations create stress on defenses because they force them to decide between matching size or speed, and either choice can create mismatches. Clare even detailed how he lined up in multiple spots at Ohio State. He played Z in 13 personnel, H in 12 personnel, Y in 11 personnel, and even took a snap at running back. That kind of versatility is exactly what NFL teams are starting to prioritize. It's not just about being a traditional inline tight end anymore. It's about being able to move around the formation, block in the run game, flex out wide, attack seams, and create matchup problems against linebackers and safeties. Now let's bring this back to the Detroit Lions. Last season, Detroit ranked 9th in the entire league in the use of 12 personnel, running it on 270 snaps. That's not a small number. That's a meaningful part of the offense. It tells you this team already understands the value of having multiple tight ends on the field and using them strategically. When you look around the league, only 3 teams ran over 100 snaps of 13 personnel last season. The Los Angeles Rams with 194, Buffalo with 117, and Arizona with 107. That Arizona connection is important because Drew Petzing, who was Arizona's offensive coordinator last season, now holds that same role in Detroit. He was directly involved in an offense that leaned into heavy personnel when the roster and injuries dictated it. Petzing made it very clear at the Combine that Detroit's offensive identity will remain fluid. He emphasized that they want their best 11 players on the field, and that can look a million different ways. That flexibility is key. He also noted that Arizona's heavy personnel usage last season was more about roster construction and injuries than a fixed philosophy. But the fact remains, it's in his repertoire. He understands the advantages and the drawbacks of going heavy, and he knows how to build game plans around it. Now let's talk about the current tight end room in Detroit. Sam Laporta is one of the most versatile and productive tight ends in the league. He's entering the final year of his rookie contract. He's also coming off a back injury that required surgery and caused him to miss the final 8 games of the season. The expectation is that he will be ready for the start of training camp, but it's still a situation worth monitoring closely. Behind him, Brock Wright is also entering the final year of his contract. Wright has proven over 5 seasons that he can be a reliable and versatile piece. He may not always grab headlines, but he understands his role and has contributed in multiple ways. On top of that, the Lions currently have Thomas Gordon and Zach Horton on the roster, giving them some additional depth. But here's where this gets interesting. With Laporta coming off surgery and both he and Wright entering the final year of their contracts, it's fair to ask whether the Lions might consider adding another versatile tight end, either through free agency or the draft. The league trend is moving toward flexibility at the position. Oregon's Kenyon Sadiq, widely considered the top tight end in this year's draft class, even talked about how exciting it is to see more tight ends involved because of the different ways teams can attack defenses through explosive passes and mismatches in the run game. When you put all of this together, you start to see the bigger picture. Detroit already values 12 personnel. The new offensive coordinator has experience with 13 personnel. The top prospects in the draft class are emphasizing versatility, and the Lions have contract situations and injury recovery to consider in their current tight end room. This isn't about replacing anyone, it's about options. It's about giving the coaching staff the flexibility to adjust week to week, month to month, depending on health, opponent, and game flow. If the Lions decide to invest in another tight end, it would likely be someone who can line up all over the field and contribute in both phases of the game. So here's the big question as we head deeper into the offseason. Should the Lions lean into this league-wide trend and add another versatile tight end to fully unlock multiple personnel groupings? Or do you believe the current room is strong enough as it stands? If you really think about it, this decision isn't just about adding another name to the depth chart, it's about how the Detroit Lions want to evolve offensively in a league that is constantly adjusting. When Drew Petzing says they want their best 11 on the field and that it can look a million different ways, that's not just coach speak. That's a philosophy rooted in flexibility, and tight end versatility sits right at the center of that idea. Look at what heavy personnel can do. When you line up in 12 or 13 personnel, defenses often respond by bringing in bigger bodies to defend the run. That opens up opportunities in the passing game. A tight end who can flex out wide or operate in the slot against a linebacker immediately creates a matchup advantage. On the flip side, if a defense stays lighter to defend the pass, you can lean into the run game and attack with size and leverage. It becomes a chess match, and the offense dictates terms. Detroit already showed last season that it's comfortable operating from 12 personnel, ranking 9th in the league with 270 snaps. That's not experimental usage. That's a core component of the offense. Adding another versatile tight end would not mean abandoning what works, it would mean expanding it. Sam Lopert's recovery from back surgery is expected to have him ready for training camp, which is positive news. But depth matters, especially at a position that takes hits in both the run and pass game. Brock Wright has proven he can step in and contribute, but both he and Laporta are entering the final year of their respective contracts. That alone creates a layer of long-term roster planning that can't be ignored. Thomas Gordon and Zach Horton are on the roster, but if the front office sees an opportunity to bring in a player who fits the modern mold, someone who can block, catch, move across formations, and force defensive adjustments, it would align perfectly with where the league is headed. And let's not forget what Petzing experienced in Arizona. While he made it clear that heavy personnel usage there was more a reflection of roster and injuries than a strict offensive doctrine, the fact remains that he coordinated an offense that ran 107 snaps of 13 personnel last season. He understands how to structure an attack around multiple tight ends. That knowledge doesn't disappear just because he's in a new city. If the Lions give him the tools, he has already shown he can use them. From a draft perspective, the trend is obvious. Prospects like Kenyon Sadiq are openly embracing the idea of playing in different spots and contributing in varied ways. The next wave of tight ends is being developed with versatility in mind. They're not just inline blockers or pure pass catchers. They're hybrid weapons. If Detroit wants to stay ahead of defensive adjustments, adding that type of player makes strategic sense, but here's the balance. You don't force it. The Lions have built their roster carefully. They won't reach just to follow a league trend. The value has to match the vision. If the right player is there at the right time, whether in free agency or the draft, could be a move that quietly strengthens the offense in ways that only become obvious once the season starts. Imagine a scenario where Detroit can seamlessly shift between 11, 12, and 13 personnel without substituting. That keeps defenses from rotating packages. It limits their ability to disguise coverages. It increases tempo options. That kind of adaptability can be the difference in tight games. At the end of the day, this isn't about headlines. It's about building an offense that can win in multiple ways. The foundation is already there. The question is whether the Lions choose to add another piece to fully maximize that flexibility. If you were in the front office, would you invest in another versatile tight end now to prepare for both the short-term and the long-term future? Or would you trust the current group and focus resources elsewhere? That long-term layer is what makes this conversation even more important, because roster construction in today's NFL is never just about the upcoming season. It's about anticipating contract timelines, injury recovery, scheme evolution, and where the league itself is moving strategically. When you look at Sam Laporta entering the final year of his rookie contract and Brock Wright in the same situation, it naturally forces you to think one step ahead. If Laporta returns to full health and continues to perform at a high level, he becomes a major decision point for the organization. Extending a productive, versatile tight end is not a small financial commitment. At the same time, if you have another young, adaptable player developing behind him that gives you leverage and security, it protects you against injuries, it protects you against market inflation, and it ensures the offensive identity doesn't have to shift abruptly if roster changes occur. From a schematic standpoint, adding another versatile tight end doesn't just impact the tight end room. It affects the run game structure, red zone packages, and even pass protection flexibility. In short yardage situations, 13 personnel can overwhelm lighter defensive fronts. In play-action concepts, multiple tight ends can sell the run more convincingly, opening windows downfield, and when you can motion a tight end across the formation, shift him into the slot, or align him off the ball, you create pre-snap movement that forces defensive communication. Drew Petzing's comment about wanting the best 11 on the field in a million different ways really reflects modern offensive thinking. It's not about labeling positions as strictly traditional anymore, it's about skill sets. If a tight end can detach from the line and run routes like a wide receiver while still contributing as a blocker, that player becomes a matchup weapon. If another tight end can handle inline duties and move defenders in the run game, you gain physical control at the point of attack. When you combine those elements, the offense becomes less predictable. Detroit already demonstrated comfort with 12 personnel, finishing 9th in the league with 270 snaps. That's proof of concept. The next step, if they choose to take it, would be deepening that identity rather than relying on just one primary receiver receiving threat at the position. And remember, heavy personnel doesn't mean conservative football. That's a misconception. Teams like the Rams, Buffalo, and Arizona showed that 13 personnel can still produce explosive plays. When defenses load up to stop what they expect to be a power run, that's when seams open. That's when safeties are forced into tough coverage assignments. It becomes about exploiting the defensive reaction. For the Lions, this decision will likely come down to value and timing. If a prospect in the draft fits the profile of someone who can line up at YH or even out wide and contribute immediately in multiple roles, it would align perfectly with both league trends and Petzing's flexibility-first mindset. If not, they may trust internal development and revisit the position later. What makes this storyline compelling is that it's not flashy. It won't dominate headlines the way a high-profile signing would, but strategic depth at tight end can quietly elevate an offense from good to difficult to defend week after week. So, as this offseason continues and roster decisions start to take shape, keep an eye on that tight end room. The Lions have options. They have a clear understanding of where the league is heading, and they have a coordinator who has already navigated heavy personnel usage at a high level. There's also a psychological component to this that often gets overlooked. When an offense can line up in multiple tight end sets and execute both the run and the pass at a high level, it changes how opponents prepare during the week. Defensive coordinators are forced to dedicate extra meeting time to personnel variations. Linebackers have to prepare for coverage responsibilities that stretch beyond their comfort zones. Safeties have to be ready to step into the box and still recover in coverage. That kind of stress adds up over a 17-game season. If the Lions commit to building true versatility at tight end, they're not just adding depth, they're shaping how defenses perceive them. A team that can seamlessly shift from 11 personnel to 12 or 13 without losing tempo forces opponents into more conservative calls. That alone can open opportunities for explosive plays. And think about the red zone. Tight ends traditionally become even more valuable inside the 20-yard line because space compresses. Having multiple players at that position who can block effectively while also being legitimate, receiving threats gives the quarterback more options. It allows the offense to disguise intent. A heavy look doesn't automatically mean a power run. It could mean play action, a leak route, or a seam attack against a linebacker in space. From a developmental standpoint, drafting or signing another versatile tight end also creates healthy competition. It pushes the room. It ensures that production and role are earned, not assumed. For a team with postseason ambitions, internal competition is critical. Depth is not just insurance, it's leverage. There's also the matter of sustainability. The NFL is a league of adjustments. What works one year is studied and countered the next. By expanding the tight end room with adaptable players, Detroit would be investing in an offense that can evolve rather than react. If defenses begin to focus heavily on limiting one player, another can step into a larger role. If injuries strike, the structure remains intact. But again,